Hello and welcome to the Doublethink Dialogues podcast. Today you're listening to Edwin,
Sue,
Jed,
and John.
So this episode we're talking all about UK politics. It is an election year this year, and I guess the landscape, the political landscape, has fractionated quite a bit. It seems so. The main parties, for anyone not in England listening, would be the Tories, led by Rishi Sunak, Lib Dem, led by Ed Davies, Labour by Keir Starmer, and then we've got a bunch of other parties. The UKIP, which has become Reform recently, led by Richard Tice and possibly fronted by Nigel Farage, the front man for Brexit. Reclaim, led by Lawrence Fox, and the Green parties, who are co-led, I guess very progressively, by Carla Denyer and Adrian Ramsey. And there's rumors in the works that Jeremy Corbyn might be coming back with a party of his own. So as the foreigner in the group, the Canadian expat, I probably have, although I can vote here because I'm in Commonwealth, I'm from the Commonwealth. But as the foreigner, I will step back a little bit and maybe lead this discussion of my three British friends. So who wants the first word on the state of British politics?
No rush to grab.
No one's grabbing that one. Okay. All right. Let's start with the incumbent party, the Tories. All right. There should be lots of thoughts on the Tories. Did they achieve what they're supposed to achieve? Are they still, in fact, a conservative party? Are they still right wing, as many people still think? And do they deserve to remain in power?
they have certain problems. They're very right wing, which is akin to the AfD in Germany and other parties in France. Would like to have power, but the left wing of the Conservative Party don't want them to. So there's an infight between the two ends of both. So when we normally have centralised parties in Labour and Conservatives, we don't have that anymore.
Right. So, and that is particularly noticeable in the Conservative Party, isn't it?
But Labour Party split the same way.
Right.
Corbynites,
Exactly.
Non-Corbynites, and one centralist, one vastly left wing.
Right.
And I suppose it goes back to the Brexit days where you
Absolutely.
had, there was a gridlock because you could not get to sufficient consensus even within a party to do anything.
It almost feels, from what you've just said, that segments of the Labour Party should join with the Tory Party, and then the other two have formed their own parties.
That's
a three-party
because they're
system.
saying right now Farage taking the right wing away,
Right.
and they're talking about Corbyn taking the left wing away.
Yeah, that's true.
So then you're left with a centrist party, which is where the Lib Dems used to hold the ground, of Conservative and Labour MPs who almost agree with each other.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So maybe we think that the current political landscape here is a bit crazy, but it might get even crazier then.
Yeah, because there's a lot to be said in the kind of coalition situation we got into back in 2010. That really the biggest party should get together in the first instance with the second biggest party, not look for whoever, the small, normally their aim is to exclude its main rival. So you're looking for, to make up a majority that excludes the second party. But there's a lot to be said for actually going with the two that, came closest to getting an overall majority.
Right, okay.
And that might
but that already happens. If you look at parliamentary business, apart from when they're actually being televised in the chamber shouting insults at each other, which they all obviously have a lovely time, they do work very cooperatively. All the committees and that are all cross-party, and they do manage to work to a consensus. It's only when you get the fringes, if you like, the extreme right wing, even within the Conservatives, the Corbynites, who won't work with anybody, because like all politicians, they're right and everybody else is wrong.
So what I'm wondering is this working together in these committees, is that actually the parties as much as perhaps the establishment, the civil service underneath the parties? Because there has been talk that the civil servants are already preparing for a Labour government, even though the election is more or less a year away. And that they're the actual ones that sort of
they always do.
The effective stuff.
They've got files, video files now, where it used to be paper files when I worked there, of what would happen if this happens, what will happen if that happens. So they're all prepared. If they go to that monetary policy, what will we do there? The civil servants are always ahead of the game,
right?
Or should be ahead of the game. And of course, the committees within Parliament are all the different parties together. and maybe chaired by the Green MP chairs one of the things. I can't remember if she chairs, but she actually chairs one of them, and Labour chairs some of the others. And the committee works, and see quite often when businessmen get pulled up before them, and they're all asking questions. They're all from different parties.
Right. So do you think then? I'm maybe going a little bit off our immediate topic, but do you think that it's all for show then? The leadership race, the party race.
Of course
Does it
it
feel
is.
like it's a game?
It's a game that's brought in from Eton and Winchester. They're in the game with them.
I suppose it fits with the system of having an election in that they will all be wanting to be able to show blue water. I think, come the election, they will all want to be able to show blue water between them and the other party, why it has to be us and not them. But each of the parties is made up of a lot of individuals, a lot of whom may be having to lean quite a bit to fit within that sort of broad church. In fact, for years I wouldn't join a party because I thought, well, I'm too far out from the sort of the general opinion of that group of people. And then you read the biographies a year later and think, well, I was much closer to being a standard person of that party than most of the cabinet were.
Right, yeah, exactly. Yeah, so it almost feels like this is sort of a football match for the rich and powerful, more or less, then.
Oh, the election years are wonderful because what they will be doing, the plebs like us, they'll be promising the world if they get into power. And it doesn't matter which party.
Right.
They'll come up with, we will do this for you, we will do that for you. And the reality is once they get into power, I think for some of them it's a shock. They're not expecting. I mean, I worked
1997.
Yeah, 1997. But I worked with county councillors some years ago. They all got elected on roadworks or whatever was the burning issue in their locality. And suddenly they realised not only were they responsible for the roadworks, but everything else that came on under their umbrella.
Right.
And if you look at Parliament, it's pretty much the same, but on a much larger scale.
I would wonder how much interest most parliamentary candidates have taken in politics in general. Yes, they're interested in politics in the sense of sort of wheeling and dealing and becoming popular in your constituency, but actual running of countries and international relations, that can come in later on. My civil servants would brief me on it when I got there.
Right, so it's sort of a game of fame and collecting a good pension at the end of the day.
Yeah. Or when you think, well, why are you there? What did you believe in? I mean, and I would say, I don't know if we've named our constituency, so I don't want to make it personal to anyone, but I would say my local MP has made a whole brand out of being apolitical. I mean, his role is to maintain, be an MP by not offending the supporters of the other party. In fact, there's a group called the Love Bombers on the basis that they were all MPs, Tory MPs, with a main rival to them being Lib Dem, and so they support anything that'll show the Tories as being practically Lib Dem.
Right. Okay.
So to get any kind of controversial view out of him, I mean, I even saw him talk, and I like him personally, but I even saw him talking at a public kind of rally to a group of WASPies, the Women for getting pensions backdated or forward dated, or whatever.
It's Women Against State Pension Injustice.
Yes,
because I actually fall into that category. I did belong to them.
Oh, right. Oh, well,
so that's a real.
Well, I think there's scope for us to fall out over that, but our MP was having a very amicable talk with him. He may well have been picking up votes, but his party certainly didn't do anything for them, and of which I approve. But he certainly, he managed to avoid confrontation with them.
Excuse me, may I very, very politely go slightly off piste here? What I would say to people who say, why shouldn't women retire at the same age as men or get the state pension, because that's the issue. Mm. And I agree. What I don't agree is when I started work in 1971, it was legal for women to be paid less than men, and they were very disadvantaged in the workplace. I joined the Navy and had to leave when I got married. But the payoff was that at 60, we got our pension.
The other payoff was that you got your husband's money as well. Just to add something else.
He hasn't got any. But the reality was that, okay, they brought this in, but rather than doing this as a sort of staggered over quite a long period of time, not only did they push the women's age up to 65 virtually overnight, then they stuck another year on to 66. So that's why I support them. Not because the principle of equalising the pension age is wrong, but the way it was done to a group of women, in particular birth years, who were already disadvantaged in the workplace when they started.
You ought to get the BBC to make a drama of it, and then someone will listen.
Yeah.
The delay, the argument for just a delay puts me in mind of St. Augustine's prayer to God, make me good, but not yet, basically. So equality, but we can push it off for a few years.
Yeah, but we still, we can. I'm sorry, I try not to get too off, but we still haven't got full equality for all sorts of reasons. But you look at women in the 60s and 70s, which is when I'm talking about how disadvantaged they were in the workplace legally, and yes, okay, that's fine to as we go on to equalise. St. Augustine, she used to change his mind quite a lot, so he's probably not the best person to follow.
I would agree with you on objecting to the change, because only on sort of obsessional grounds that it was a nice tidy system until you stuck in, you had a kind of a ramp up, and then you had two ramps up and go, no, this, it looked neat before, you've made a mess of it now.
Well, I'm sure that Sue and I will probably have a good discussion, and I can bring in why it's not equal against men as well. But we should probably get back to the UK politics part.
So we can support your
I don't think I need help. But we should return to the UK politics.
Yes.
So I wanted to.
It is UK politics.
It is, and it does highlight. Yes, it does.
Little issues.
It does highlight exactly. Yes.
Don't understand what happens to the actual person.
Yeah.
They only see the overall view.
But it also shows that there are issues where you think, well, these politicians are stupid. They can't see an obvious, perfectly correct point. But actually, there's another group of people who take exactly the opposite.
If you want to just very quickly look at this, and I won't take any more than this. My last word, possibly, is that
what cut you off if it's not.
God, the power. I worked it out what I lost from not getting my state pension at 60, so I didn't get free bus passes and all the other winter fuel payments and all the other things that came, and I reckon I had less. I lost over £50,000. Now, if you went to the average person in the street, even some of the quite wealthy citizens of Harrogate, and said, well, actually, we're just going to crop you for £50,000, there would be uproar.
And I suspect we could have an entire episode on pensions as well. So there's several more.
The general point I would draw is that, for me, I'm probably over the next half hour, I'm going to be saying how stupid all the parties are and how easily they could agree with me and get it right. And they're very unpopular, but they're unpopular. All the parties are unpopular with almost everyone, but for different reasons. Yeah. I'm not sure there is a set of policies that that would make any one party popular with everyone.
Yeah, so that's what I wanted to highlight here, right?
Cherry pick off which ones you want.
But you have the issue we just highlighted, which shows the division basically. Mm-hmm. And I think what John was saying is, you have each side more or less feels fairly strongly on their position, and the parties kind of have to, in some ways, walk between that. Who do they want to be their supporters? Okay, so that's which side they end up favoring. It kind of like as we were just suggesting with the rich and powerful football match, right? You're picking your supporters based on who's going to be loudest and most supportive of you in a way.
Just answer me one question.
If this is about the pensions work, I'm going to edit it out.
It has nothing to do with pensions. But you talk about the different parties, and we all know they're going to be loving.
They're all basically the same in reality.
But you look at who's at the top of them.
Oh, all rich people, yes.
Not only are they rich people, they went to the right schools.
Yes. Definitely.
By and large, they're all male. Now, you take Labour, which is meant to be the party of the working person, and that's how it was set up back in the day. We've got Sir Keir Starmer.
Right, exactly.
Lib Dems, Sir Ed Davey. We've got, Rishi Sunak just happens to have
Goldman Sachs.
Yeah. As a very quiet, small person, how do they relate to me? Because they have no interest in my
No,
concern.
they don't.
And I think if you spread that's my concerns. Other people have different concerns, but most people's concerns are very low-key, local. They're not interested in those because it just doesn't fit in.
I think this is an issue that's becoming more obvious in politics around the world, as well as is the disconnect between, let's say, the power and the average person, and the fact that they could utilize the average person's knowledge, like as a population, right? We do together have great knowledge on a great many subjects, great experiential knowledge that could be used, but they choose to focus on their issues and kind of ignore the population.
Can I give you an example of that? I was on an advisory committee to Tony Blair's cabinet for youth crime. And Tony Blair had a big thing about knives, exactly as it is at the moment. We're going to stop knife crime overnight. What we're going to do, we're going to jail everyone for 3 years who's carrying a knife. So that's fine. I spent the whole weekend writing out my thoughts on the matter and whatever's, sent it in. He couldn't have read it, or they couldn't have read it, till the Monday morning. I go in the courts, and what do I hear? Do not sentence anyone for prison for carrying a knife. Email from way above. So obviously Tony Blair hadn't talked to the civil servants hadn't talked to the Home Secretary, and they're spouting this off in the comments, and they say, don't do it. Jail's a fool, don't do it.
Yeah. No, I'm sure it's obvious there's a lot of this double talk going on. In fact, probably would be a little bit of the inspiration for the name for our podcast. But I mean, they promise one thing with potentially no intention of doing anything about it, or they know they can't. Like you said, like, okay, prisons are full. So right now they come up with the excuse of, oh, well, we have to be lenient on crime because it's not their fault and all this. But then you're like, well, okay, maybe the real reason is because you don't want to build any more prisons because the prisons are full and you're just waiting for the population to decline, which is another topic John and I have gone on to. But so I want to move back to specifically, like, say, election-oriented politics and put you on the spot for the Tories and Rishi Sunak. Will they be reelected? Should they be reelected? So go on in whatever order you feel like.
Depends on war starts or not. And I think that'll make a big difference.
Which war is the question, I guess.
Do you think that's why we've bombed the Houthis, in the hope that a war will start?
Well,
it doesn't seem to be going so well so far.
You've got to look at the fact of 1982. 1982, Margaret Thatcher, who I actually knew Margaret Thatcher, very nice lady, but she went to war. She was absolutely getting destroyed at Rishi Sunak at the moment for that war. Afterwards, she walked it.
Do you think Rishi Sunak would be the leader you'd want in a war?
No.
Exactly. So we have our answer then.
I won't want Keir Starmer either.
That's true as well. Unfortunately, we're in that position, aren't we?
The man who failed in the CPS and then decided got an idea to get rid of it.
Yeah, exactly. So the question then, I think we're more or less in agreement that. Do you think the Tories are going to win the next election? Does anyone think the Tories will win the next election?
Probably not. They've been in too long.
We need to change.
Yeah, I suspect that everyone's pretty much thinking the same thing. So does that mean if Labour is the main opposition, that would pretty much everyone is considering that they're going to be the ones who win the next election? Now the question is, I guess, what's the role of Reform Party in that, and Lib Dems, and how large of a victory will they have? Do we look forward to a country under Labour government?
I think there's something else you've missed out, because Scotland, as you know, went to the Scottish Nationalists, and they've been making a mess up for equally long period of time, 13 years. And I'm guessing, Nicola Sturgeon outside her own party wasn't popular. But the new one, is it Hunza, whatever his name is?
Something like that.
Yeah. One, he hasn't got her presence, because whether you loved her or loathed her, she was very pushy. You couldn't ignore her, could you? Whereas he sort of disappeared a bit like a lot of the other leaders.
Well, if he's pushy, he's pushy on an issue that doesn't, relate to some fraction of the population, but not everyone. I mean, Palestine is not the typical Scots' primary concern.
No.
Well, I guess especially because Scotland wants to. Well, their discussion is about their own separation, isn't it? So,
put millions of pounds into Gaza. What's it got to do with the Scottish Parliament? The money of the British government, which is going for the whole country, not just England, because England doesn't have their own parliament, which is another issue that needs to be debated, gives them money to spend on their population, not to get put off in foreign aid.
Yeah, and that's an opinion from a great many people, I think, as well, and especially in countries that do have their own separation issues, like Scotland as well. You can even look at it even more strongly. Like we're sort of managing the separation issues, and I realize there's a lot of horror going on in Palestine right now, but but the separation issues in Israel, Palestine, when we have our own issues in Scotland, England that we want to discuss as well.
But looking at the future shape of the government, of course, Labour are very hopeful. I don't know if they're confident of getting back a lot of those SNP seats. And from the grumbles from the Scottish people, sounds like they're in with a good chance. And that might tip them into a majority.
Right. So
I'm not sure they'll need much tipping. I think
that's the issue, isn't it?
I think the days of saying, basically Labour needs Scotland. I mean, it'll be one time I would think they could coast without it.
Yeah.
And so we're pretty much in agreement. We think that Labour it's their election to lose. I think, not that we necessarily like that opinion.
As what size the majority is going to be? If they
right.
Above a hung parliament, so you've got 6 or 7 votes. I don't know if you remember back to Wilson's time when he had the 6 vote majority.
I don't think he was even born.
Possibly.
Well, 4 months later, we had another election because it was so he just couldn't manage with a small majority, and he went to a pact with Lib End, so the Lib Black pact, and it didn't work. So they've either got to get a large majority that they can work with, or you're going to have to work with another party to get a large majority, because otherwise the left wing will kick everything across the road, same as the right wing the Tory party is doing now.
Well, I would wonder if they're talking about the left kicking things. I would have thought possibly the rather likely large majority is the moment for the left to kick off. Sir Keir is firmly in the saddle now because Labour needs someone to give them a majority. But if they have a large majority, I would see the possible outcome as being you then have a Labour split. I suspect that people in Labour are sort of biting their tongues rather until the election is over.
They did have Jeremy Corbyn, and he was for Labour, and he, for all he was going to do wonderful things, he was actually a disaster. And even with
he was a disaster electorally.
But even within his own party, a lot of people couldn't work with him because he had such fixed views, and he was very.
We know some people who couldn't work with him at all.
We do know people who couldn't work with him at all. So the left, as you mentioned, he's looking at forming his own party.
Right.
For those who remember, sort of like the miners' strike in the 80s, Arthur Scargill tried to do exactly the same, form his own party, and it failed.
The British system, and I don't know about the Canadian system, but the British system is very much against other parties succeeding. And I think there was a change imagined that out of the Brexit situation, they were going to emerge as a new force. And they just were wiped out.
Yeah, that's, I think most countries, democratic countries, have the 2-party system with a third party as a sort of steam valve option, but they're really set up to favor the 2 parties, aren't they?
Yeah, and there's an irony in that the people in power could change this. And if you take, for example, Boris, if you imagine who is, well, probably too soon to say his career is finished, but
well, Cameron came back, so
who knows?
And Blair,
and Blair, everything, doesn't it? When you're so on your knees as a government, you've got to bring in a failed prime minister.
Yeah, we've got to look at Cameron in a different way for the foreign secretary's job than he was prime minister. He is known throughout the world, and at this time when we're in such a bad state in the world, you probably need someone with the clout he's got to be foreign secretary. Who'd ever heard the foreign secretary before him, apart from Boris, who made a botcher it.
I hate to be a party pooper, but Prince Andrew is known throughout the world. But you wouldn't actually be saying he'd be a fantastic person to be our
especially known in the Caribbean.
But my thought about Boris, though, is at one point he had the power to give us some kind of proportional representation. And I'm thinking of the kind I like, which is right down to a granular level. So basically, it's not. The top 3 or 4 parties get through the net, but you don't let small ones. If you had a system, and that's not, there would have been possible at one time before the next election, but if you had a UK-wide constituency, so you could actually elect individuals on their personal popularity, then Boris would have been in Parliament forever because he's a Marmite politician. However, beyond the pale he is now, he would have always have had a majority. And he's now missed that chance to give himself a forever job.
Well, the other problem is, of course, over the years, it's always been rumbled for about getting rid of the House of Lords because it's undemocratic. It's our second chamber. that is full of the great and good. You don't have to have any particular merit to be a lord. It's just luck of birth.
Now, or go to the right church.
Or go to the right church or the right school or whatever else it is. Wouldn't that be great if proportional representation was a bit radical for the House of Commons? We actually went for proportional representation of candidates in the House of Lords. So you've got an elected second chamber.
Could be interesting, yeah, because I have seen as a foreigner here that the House of Lords sometimes takes really positive stands on certain things I would have expected them not to, when the Parliament has taken stands that seemed very strange to me. And so I do think the two balance each other in unexpected ways. But it would be very interesting if the House of Lords was instead a representation of the people, for example.
I suppose
It's a bit radical.
Very radical.
The difficulty would be the question of legitimacy. You know, if an increasing number of people think that PR would give Parliament a greater legitimacy, then the House of Lords having that and the House of Commons having first past the post would lead you on to a rivalry as to who rules the roost, which we managed to avoid by making it sort of
only because if you look back at the history, is the fact, was it Lloyd George or somebody threatened that if he didn't get his way, he would abolish the House of Lords. It wasn't they came out of it their own goodwill, because that's their private gentleman's club.
It still is.
Well, it still is. And even though women sit in the House of Lords, it's a relatively new thing. In the 1940s, they were pushing to get women to be allowed to sit in the House of Lords. 4 and 4 our time, but still not so far away in time.
Yeah. So we've got the Tories on the way out, Labour probably winning, spoilers potentially played by the Liberal Democrat Party and the Reform Party. What are your thoughts on those then?
I mean, I see this Reform as, to some extent, a spoiler, not for a Labour win, but an assistance to the Labour win, in the sense that people who would have been drawn into line because of our system would say, well, yeah, I prefer Reform to the Conservatives, but obviously I'm going to vote Conservative to keep Labour out. Are probably increasingly saying, well, do I really care between the Conservatives and Labour? I'll have my vote for Reform, because what's to choose between the alternatives. And actually, again, going to my local candidate, I've heard him say that he favours voting for the party you prefer, not playing at tactical voting. So, in a sense, if on that basis, his advice would have been for somebody who prefers Reform to the Conservatives to vote Reform. I don't imagine him repeating that advice between now and the next election, but that was so. But I think people are not going to be kind of drummed into line out of fear of the Labour are going to get in. Well, look, it looks like either the Labour or the Conservatives are going to get in, and we don't like either, so we'll do what we like.
Right. So do you think that age, maybe we're past it? That because the way you mentioned has been very common for quite a while. I vote for this party because I don't want that party to win.
Yes.
Basically. Do you think that with the Tories and Labour maybe it's being more difficult to judge between them in some ways? That kind of thinking has sort of is disappearing between in the population.
And the sort of anxiety to recreate this blue wall, because they must be asking themselves, well, why is what issue is going to persuade people to vote for us rather than them, despite, and I suppose, any long period of government must have some disappointments, but it's, apart from Brexit, it's hard to see anything to cheer about during that period.
Which is
so
controversial.
Well, that in itself, I have to say, I thought the rest of Europe were appalling after Brexit, but that's a separate issue. But the actual vote, the referendum vote, was very, very close.
Very, incredibly close, yes. Yeah. And a really strange way to decide the fate of a country by allowing such a close.
David Cameron, I rest my case, because any other referendum where you wanted such a major decision, 75-25.
Yeah, it should be much higher. Yeah. I agree.
And he didn't. It was just a straight split vote.
But anyway, even for those who like the outcome, I don't know if anyone comes out with thinking, well, that was a great success we owe to the Conservatives. We know we owe it to them in spite of, we know what the intent, it was not a referendum to take us out of the EU. It was a referendum to kill off Euroscepticism.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that's why a number of people like me would have voted for it, on the basis, no, we haven't decided on leaving, but we don't want Euroscepticism killed off.
It's also the fact that they didn't even deliver on what they kind of were promising, even if they didn't necessarily. Had they managed to do what was then sort of promised, let's say, by Brexit, they may have come out as being, at least to part of the country, they may have come out as being, oh yes, that was a great Conservative Party. But since they initiated Brexit in a way and didn't achieve anything with it other than chaos, essentially they lost the entire country from that, didn't they?
And I was probably alone in being surprised when David Cameron resigned the next day. I mean, he'd claimed sort of even-handedness. The idea that he couldn't lead us, he would have to step away if we left, put a lie to what he'd been, this whole, pretense of, I will negotiate in good faith and then decide on the outcome. And
do you know what the problem was with Brexit? I mean, the Leave side were very, very loud. They were very clear. They, like all politicians, promised us to the earth. But the Remain side of staying within Europe was arrogant.
They didn't present a good case, in my opinion, as well.
They didn't.
Basically,
But if you looked at one of the driving forces, which of course we're not supposed to mention because it's controversial, we had mass immigration from Europe.
That was the major driving force.
And Eastern Europeans in particular. We've always had immigration since days of the Saxons and that lot. And what they didn't consider, people living in very overcrowded areas, because a lot of the people coming in, hardworking though they were competing for jobs and housing and everything else at the bottom. And that's not on ethnicity grounds, because if you ever chatted to people,
no, sheer numbers.
It was just sheer numbers, and that's why people were saying, "We want out. We can't cope with this level of immigration."
And it's interesting that the peak of pro-Brexit was my kind of ancestral, or one of my ancestral homelands, the Wash and the Fen type area. Where the migration was highest. And I'm thinking, well, I'm not really noticing a great deal of effect where I am, but if the people at the sharp end of it want to leave, then I owe them some solidarity. Whereas you'd get people in Harrogate, being prior to the current MP being a Lib Dem, when other people were concerned about immigration. Well, I think in those days it was true to say, well, you've never seen any immigration. How you're voting for a pro-immigration party, ignoring all the people who are saying, we've got it and we don't like it.
Yeah, well, we've definitely seen immigration now, haven't we? Yes. But yeah, I've often said that had it been held, let's say in 2010, the vote, it would never have even been close. Like the Remain would have overwhelmed quite easily. But because precisely what you said, Sue, because
and I voted to stay because I think although Europe is wrong on most things, it's better to be within it than outside it. But that's But there was no great debate on what are the advantages of staying in the EU. And so far, I haven't seen all these billions of pounds that they've promised us.
We had COVID. You've got to say we had COVID.
Everybody had COVID.
Yeah, but that's
COVID worked better for us.
That's the whole field, hasn't it?
Yes.
He's so reasonable.
No, reasonable. But
well, that's true.
COVID came along shortly afterwards in real terms.
Right.
And even if they had plans to do it, they're all out the window straight away because all this money had been pumped in to injections and healthcare and all the rest of it.
Which interestingly, that massive overspend, Rishi Sunak was going to repair that damage that someone else has done. Well, hang on, it was you that did
it.
But he didn't have a lot of choices, did he? To be honest.
Well, the big choice, which is not popular, would be to do nothing, which was what they were originally planning to do. Tell the population the severity of it. Tell them who's at risk, and let them decide for themselves. Had they done that, essentially what Sweden did, then we would have been in good shape now.
And unfortunately for Boris, his gut reaction, but not the one he went with.
Well, again, from what I understand, there was, again, we're getting off topic as well, but there was the modeling, right? So the modeling of the disease, which was the same guy who modeled the 2009 quotes pandemic, which was wrong as well. This guy seems to be loved by Downing Street and was way off in his predictions this time as well. And so basically the government panicked and went into the lockdowns.
But aren't they in a win-win situation with this, whether this man was right or wrong? Because they can say, well, we had this terrible forecast, we're all going to die like the plague, but because we took action, like politicians always do, claim the good things, the figures are much lower than they should have been.
They can argue that, but they're wrong because
Sweden as an example.
Well, they're also wrong because the excess deaths are still high and unaccountable, right? And that's, well, we don't know what that's from, but it could be tied.
Poor recording. We know one case.
It's definitely poor recording of COVID.
Yeah, a friend of my son used to work in a nursing home. They had 4 people die.
Right.
3 of them were completely separate because nursing home people die in.
They're in their 90s.
In their 90s, old age and whatever illness. Right. But they were all put down as COVID.
Right. But the point is, we still see excess deaths above normal now, and it's not attributable to COVID because it's not relative to COVID. So it's still high. And so the claim is it the vaccine? Is it something else? Is it maybe the vaccine interacting with something that was hidden that we didn't know about? Heart-related stuff, for example. But again, this is another topic we can discuss
or is it
in the
because
future.
The NHS basically closed down to everything but COVID?
Well, yeah, but the problem is it's not just in the UK.
No.
So
us and everybody else.
Yeah, so we're all seeing these excess deaths. In fact, in some places, even in Canada, some places
even
now.
In Canada,
no,
wow.
I mean, but a developed country, right? The leading cause of death, I think, in Alberta now is unknown. It's unknown, right? They don't know what the leading cause of death is. It's like sudden adult death syndrome, basically. Right. You see all these athletes falling down on the pitch and stuff. Yeah. So, but that's another. We definitely need to have a talk about that at some point. So we're nearing the end of the episode. I want to put you on the spot then. Do you have a preference in this election? And if not, if yes, let me know. If not, that's fine. And then just confirm, who do you think is going to win? And is that a good thing?
I think Keir Starmer is going to win unless somebody, Angela Rayner or whoever, unless they come out before the election to say, well, he's a fascist. We're going to go our own way as soon as we're in power. And I think they've got more nous than to do that. My concern afterwards will be just which way that you go. And they're doing very well at the moment by not making it clear what they're going to do. I mean, I started feeling a responsibility to throw my weight, not that it's very critical to the election, but feeling I ought to favour Sir Keir because of his very surprising declaration that he wouldn't scrap the 2-child cap. I assumed that was top of Angela Rayner's hit list, and that it may well be, but I don't know how long that will last. To me, it's a question of are they the Workers' Party or are they the Benefit Claimants Party? And those are not the same thing to me.
Oh, I think that's definitely another episode we could argue about.
we keep spawning new episodes with our discussions. So, Sue, what's your opinion on this?
Plague on all their houses. They don't represent me. I mean, I think one of the great pities is that when you go and vote, you can't tick a sort of none of the above because.
But you can tick all of the above, and that sends the same sense.
You can say I don't
want any of these.
Right.
I've actually spoiled my papers because one, as you say, one of the problems with Labour is very hard to understand what they actually stand for, and I don't think they know. I think that's
this is an issue with the left, isn't it? Quite often is. Their main stance is against the right.
Absolutely.
That's basically their only stance, right?
We're against it.
Exactly.
Whatever they do is wrong.
Yeah, exactly.
And my worries with Labour, one hand, the socialist, our aim is to lift everyone out of poverty, particularly people who've not made any effort for themselves. But on the other side, it is potentially a copy of the Conservatives, because the word growth keeps cropping up in Labour talk, which to me ties into immigration. Basically, we're going to grow the economy. We're not going to grow per capita production. We'll just grow production. So they worry me from both potential sides. Them worry me.
I think the problem with both, or with all politicians really, is they really don't have that much interest in what life is like for the probably the bottom 90% of people, because it doesn't affect them.
And the trouble is that they, in reaction to that, they occasionally come out of their ivory tower to take up the cause of the bottom 1%, to say, look, here we are looking after the rest. They think, oh no, that's not. There's another sort of 98% between you and that.
Yeah, that's called optics, isn't it?
Yes, and there's 3,000 different sorts. It's not just one mass at the bottom.
Yeah, exactly. So, Jed, you have the last word on this one.
Well, Labour 97 won by landslide. The first thing it did to Harrogate was cancel the bypass. That's why we have Gridlock and Harrogate now. Even though Tony Blair had said infrastructure and he's got to load the money into it. Keir Starmer was doing exactly the same thing. He's saying, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. No policies, but we're going to do this, we're going to do that. But no thought behind it. Because he'll go into the Treasury and the Treasury say, we haven't got the money to do that.
Right.
Yeah.
Now what are you going to do? So Labour are going to get in. 12 months later, they're going to get rid of Keir Starmer. Someone else will get in charge. And it'll be the same as the Tory party been over the last 5 years. Then that one will go and then another one will come in. And eventually they'll get less and less seats. And in 10 years' time, we're having the same conversation about Conservatives getting rid of Labour. And nothing will change.
Well,
the poor will still be the poor, and the rich will still be the rich.
On that sadly accurate note, that's about all we have for this episode. So thank you for listening. If you've enjoyed, please share, leave us a comment on your thoughts, and subscribe to Doublethink Dialogues. And we'll talk to you in the next episode.